Share. Okay. Share. Let me see 1 second. Thank you again, Salman, for putting all this up. We really appreciate it. And just to tell all the participants, you've got a real mega star lineup here. Firstly, Salman, thank you for your hospitality. And events like this create a lot of intellectual cross-pollination, and we don't get enough of that in science. In a time when there's so much strife all around the world, this brings us all together in a wonderful way. And just for the audience to know, let none of these people fool you. Greg Torst may look like Santa Claus. He's an avid bicyclist. He's probably one of the best spine surgeons in the world. So don't let his Santa Claus look fool you. And same with Roger Hartle. He's probably the master of minimally invasive spine surgery. And so he's a great guy. And the thing about Mike Feelings, I'll tell you that, the H index, I think he has the highest H index of any neurosurgeon. I think it's like 115. And I wanted to tease him. I was in India last 2 months ago, and one of the diabetologists there had an H index of like 145, which is the highest for a scientist in India. So like, oh my God. So I'm going to run through this for systematic reviews. My fellow Daniela helped me put some of this together. So it's great being here again, and I love this format. And I'm sure all of us are going to be in Dubai, which should be a fun time. But just to briefly, let me just get this. Yeah. So this is just to give you an overview of the data. I'm trying to get this straightened. Mike's still on, Mr. H Index Master. So you can see here, this is how we sort of look at it. This background information, expert opinion, and, in the litigious area that we live in the United States, that becomes very, very moot. There's unfiltered information, RCT, cohort studies, and then of course filtered information. So the real apex is systematic review. So it's something we kind of use a lot of and is very helpful. And there's a certain thing called wisdom. I mean, a lot of people say that we're not up to date with medical knowledge as experts, and that sometimes we are mired in sort of antiquity and we don't adjust. But this I thought was a great curve of our clinical judgment, tying up-to-date knowledge. And you can see the lines don't meet. So we're never up to date. The best expert may not know the latest studies. So I think it's just something to remember and be cognizant of. And when you're doing your research, and we've had great talks on AI, how to write a paper. I think the most important ingredient in publication is intellectual curiosity. There's papers on the ways Shakespeare characters died in their plays. Like it was an analysis. How many people died with stabbing? How many people died with sword fights? And it's a fascinating study. I found it interesting. And something as pedestrian as a drainage after subdural hematomas, which is like a pedestrian thing. We don't think much of it. But that got published in Lancet. Some resident in England said, I'm going to send a survey out. And then they did a randomized trial and they showed you put a drain in for 24 hours, your outcome is better. So I always urge the residents and the younger people to think out of the box, think for interesting things, think tangentially. There's studies on pterional craniotomies, which is like the bread and butter of every craniotomy, but very few people look at olfaction. And so there was a great paper on how olfaction is affected with the pterional craniotomy. So if you look at the extraordinary in the ordinary, you'll come up with a good paper. So that's something I think AI cannot give you, is that spark of innovation. Think like Steve Jobs. You don't have to take LSD to get there, but you can try, okay? So these are just some of the plans, like plan, search, screen, abstract, clean report. And I think the planning should be meticulous. And one of the biggest things I see with neurosurgical residents or younger neurosurgeons is they'll have a great paper. They'll go present it, and then it goes into the land of cobwebs, okay? It's never executed. So that execution, planning is good, but execution is much more important. So I think there's been several surveys that you go to WFNS, CNS, or EANS or WFNS, you present a paper there. The conversion rate of a presentation to paper is less than 30%, which means 70% of that effort is kind of wasted. So you don't want to be in that 70%. So like Mike alluded to, there's guidelines, and I think with meta-analysis and these data surveys, you want to look at databases. I think the Prisma checklist is the one we use. It's very good. It's a good screening method. How do you get there? What do you divide? What do you look at? So it's something that's the way you do. And I think this PICO question is very good. What is the population? What is the targets group for the study? Are you looking at people with tuberculosis? Are you looking at somebody with metastatic cancer? What is the intervention? And what is the comparison? What's the alternative group? I mean, there was, Atul Gawande wrote about a palliative care for terminal lung cancer, and the outcome was better if you did nothing. So not that that promotes nihilism, but it makes you think different. And it diminishes the hubris you might have that by saying, well, I treated all this, but really, did it make a difference or not? So that comparison point is very important. And outcome, what is the benefits from it? Where do you get with that? So this PICO is very good. It's a good change. So this is an example of PICO. Does vitamin C prevent and treat the common cold when compared to placebo? Linus Pauling was the guy who got 2 Nobel Prizes. That was his big thing, and it didn't work. So we still take vitamin C, but it's an important question. You think of intervention, outcome, comparison, and population. Yeah. So the registration for this is you can register on Prospero. This is a great way. We recommend it. We use it. It's a good thing to try. And then again, plan Prisma guidelines, Prospero, then establish product, and sort of look at what your project is going to do. I think the thing that I really like to stress is an exhaustive, reproducible search. And this takes hard work. This is not something ChatGPT can do for you. And when you present or you write a paper, this is aimed for the younger people in the audience. The good thing is you become an expert in that. If you're looking at Rosa Dorfman, okay, I took out a meningioma 4 months ago. We thought it was a meningioma, looked like a meningioma. Turned out to be Rosa Dorfman. I have a fellow, Daniela, who's brilliant. And I said, listen, let's look at this. And she got Rosa Dorfman in the spine, Rosa Dorfman intracranially. It's a rare disease, but Daniela is now an expert on Rosa Dorfman. So you will get enriched by your search, which something ChatGPT will not do. And there's studies to show that people that write their own essays versus having ChatGPT, the retention rate, if you write yourself, is 10%. If you get ChatGPT to do it, it's less. It's the other way around. If you write it yourself, 86% you retain it. If ChatGPT does it for you, retention rate is less than 15%. So you don't get smarter doing that. Again, the terms across different databases. So if you look at author names in PubMed, Embase, and Web of Science Translation, then you look for data publication, you look for the title, you look at the subject. So there's certain tricks to this that you just need to be acquainted with. So if you have that, it makes your search a little bit easier. Again, document, search string, use of filters, very important. And I think you have to have an exhaustive search because part of a meta-analysis and review is it's a filtration system. So you're going to look at this, you're at a water hydrant, you take all this off. What you want is a clear, transparent glass of water. And how you get there is all the hard work. So again, you want to have at least 2 reviewers. And I think one of the things we're seeing in submissions is, besides plagiarism, there is scientific fraud, okay? Some of the most highly illustrative sort of institutions in the world, they look at the DNA pictures or they look at some of the, electrophoresis, it's fudged. So again, you want to be careful on that. And I think ethics is a whole different topic. Again, this was a simple topic we were looking at, pediatric patients, look at inclusion, exclusion criteria, be very detailed and succinct about it, and then screen the patients. Okay, you look at all the document screening, full screening, and then you put all that in a sheet. This is just a paper that we sort of looked at effectiveness of group art therapy and quality of life in pediatric patients with cancer. This is an RCT, how we went about it. We did abstract screening. This Daniela, my fellow, did this. And again, you prepare the abstract, retrieve all the articles. So I think it's very, 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 very detailed. Again, critical appraisal, the risk of bias. You have to assess your selection, attrition, biases, and so there's several methods you can do that with. Again, study type, there's primary twos. I think Mike talked about it, Rob 2, Robbins, the JVI, Quadus, all those are there. These are easy to follow. And then the grade, you kind of rate each critical outcome and you downgrade it, put the observational stuff in. And I'm going to try and finish because I only have 10 minutes. So here again, PICO question, you look at certainty of grade. This is a little complex slide, but very useful. And then I think I'll talk briefly in the time remaining about meta-analysis. So you want to choose the right effect size, calculate it consistently across studies, pool them using a good statistical model, and then assess the heterogeneity. Find out if it's a binary, you look at risk ratio, odds ratio, risk difference. Statistics and science has become a whole language of its own. As good as you think it might be, you're like, oh my God, there's more to be learned. So I always tell our residents and fellows, make sure you're good at this and that you can be knowledgeable. So we want to extract data for effect size. There's a fixed effect model and the random effect model, and there's these mathematical ways of doing it. And then you assess heterogeneity. So again, the 95% confidence interval of the result on the graphic side, result of the study, I think is very important to show. In the last few minutes that I have, I'm going to talk a little bit about, we started a new journal, the WFNS journal, and we really wanted a journal that was not Eurocentric or Americocentric. We wanted a global view on this. So this is good old Tina Turner that only Greg and I probably remember about the song, We Don't Need Another Hero. But for the younger people, I'll tell you it's a good song. So this is the voice of 40,000 neurosurgeons worldwide. We've now indexed in Google, and hopefully by next year we'll be on PubMed. We're doing a bunch of special issues. We have a really nice international board. We're doing special issues on trauma, and so I invite the younger people to contribute to it. I know there's been a lot of turmoil in the world and a lot of turmoil in the WFNS, but this is Carl Sagan's beautiful picture of the planet Earth, and he says, on a mote of dust suspended in a beam. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. That's what reminds us, that brings us all together. This is a picture of Earthrise that was taken from Jim Lovell. So it kind of reminds us, it's the old the African line of Ubuntu. I am, so we are. So on that note, I'll end this. Thank you again for the opportunity. Congratulations, Salman, for putting on a great show. And anybody has any questions about the journal or any of this, please feel free to contact me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anil. Hey, there's one question in the chat. It says, how do you decide if a question is best answered by a systematic review or a meta-analysis?
I think that depends on the question, really. You know what I mean? If it's too broad-based, you may want to select what's better. I like reviews because they look at everything, and maybe the moderators want to chip in. I think Mike, any comment on that?
Mike is traveling from Houston, which is
Oh
why
my
I'm sitting
God,
here
that's a
moderating.
long way away.
Yeah.
I might reframe the question a little bit. I think sometimes, um, when you do a systematic review versus a scoping review. So just to clarify, a meta-analysis is a systematic review. It's a quantitative analysis of the data that arise from a systematic review. It involves the generation of forest plots. Sometimes the data don't allow quantification and one needs to do a qualitative synthesis. An alternative form of a review is a scoping review, where you do a very broad literature search, but your questions are much broader. And so I would encourage the questioner to perhaps look at the definitions of systematic review, scoping review, and then the meta-analysis is what I've said that is encompassed within the systematic review.
Neil, I have a question, maybe half comment. What's the one thing you find that really weakens people when they submit a meta-analysis? And my take was always that they include inferior quality papers that may support their view, but are not quality.
Yeah, I think there's a bias, and sometimes weaker papers are admitted to slant it a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As much as we like it, we all have our inherent biases, and it should never project on. But I agree with you that weaker papers, questionable papers will burrow their way in, and sometimes we see like great papers, some papers have been completely missed out. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
when you're the author, like somebody wrote a big article on petroclival meningiomas. I'm like, wait a minute, where's my paper on this? You know what I mean? So you're like, how did this happen? And it's not a personal thing. It's probably an oversight or something. But I think, it's important to sort of view it with that lens. I mean, I think Franco Cervede, I was in Zurich at a meeting and he talked about MMA, and they did a nice sort of review of 3 papers and said it's not mandatory, which is, it's interesting. It's like the decompressive craniectomy study. The Europeans said it really doesn't work. You're going to have more vegetative people. The Americans said it's great. We're making more people, keep them alive, and our nursing homes are full. So, sometimes there's